to revoke Staci Turner's medical license. And let's talk about it. So far, the petition that's asking for 50,000 signatures has 45,362 verified signatures. Now, here's the issue. To the governor of Mississippi, the Mississippi State Board of Medical Licensure, the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, the Mississippi Attorney General, the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and all agencies charged with protecting the integrity of Mississippi's criminal justice system. We, the undersigned citizens, families, advocates, and supporters of equal justice under the law, respectfully but unequivocally call for an independent investigation into the professional conduct, forensic determinations, and death investigations overseen by Mississippi Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Staci Turner. The Office of the State Medical Examiner occupies one of the most consequential positions within Mississippi's justice system. Medical examiners are entrusted with determining the cause and manner of death through objective scientific analysis. Their conclusions influence criminal investigations, judicial proceedings, insurance determinations, and most importantly, whether grieving families ever receive justice. That public trust is compromised whenever credible questions arise regarding the accuracy, consistency, or impartiality of death investigations. Over the past several years, multiple deaths involving African American individuals have generated substantial public concern. Families, independent forensic experts, civil rights advocates, and members of the public have questioned whether these investigations were conducted with the rigor, transparency, and impartiality required by accepted forensic standards. Among those cases are Trey Reed, a 21-year-old Delta State University student found hanging from a tree in September 2025. Although his death was officially ruled a suicide, his family has publicly challenged that determination and commissioned an independent forensic review. Their pursuit of additional examination reflects a profound lack of confidence in the state's investigation. Damian Cameron, following his death after an encounter with Rankin County Sheriff's deputies, Dr. Turner's office classified the manner of death as undetermined. Independent forensic pathologists later concluded that the evidence supported a homicide determination, raising significant questions about the original findings and whether critical evidence was appropriately evaluated. And Wilson, his family has publicly expressed concern that his body was embalmed before they believed all necessary forensic examinations had been completed, thereby limiting opportunities for additional independent analysis. Whether or not protocol was followed, the circumstances have further eroded public confidence in the integrity and transparency of Mississippi's death investigation process. Nolan Wells, his death has likewise become the subject of significant public scrutiny. An independent forensic pathologist concluded that the manner of death should remain undetermined pending further investigation and state that foul play could not be excluded. That opinion stands in contrast to the state's conclusions and underscores the need for objective review. No single disputed case necessarily establishes misconduct. However, when multiple investigations involving similar public concerns continue to emerge, government oversight is not merely appropriate, it is essential. This petition does not ask the public to presume wrongdoing. Instead, it asks government officials to fulfill their legal and ethical obligation to determine whether Mississippi's death investigation system is operating with scientific integrity, professional independence, and equal treatment under the law. So, what are the people's demands? They are demanding that the appropriate authorities appoint an independent panel of board-certified forensic pathologists from outside the state of Mississippi to review disputed death investigations overseen by Dr. Staci Turner, conduct a comprehensive audit of death classifications in cases where credible concerns have been raised by families or supported by independent forensic opinions, determine whether accepted forensic pathology standards, ethical obligations, and state laws were consistently followed, examine whether any systemic disparities or patterns exist in the investigation or classification of deaths involving African Americans, publicly release the findings of the investigation to ensure transparency and restore public confidence. If the evidence establishes professional misconduct, gross negligence, incompetence, ethical violations, or any breach of licensing standards, initiate disciplinary proceedings, including suspension or revocation of Dr. Turner's medical license, as warranted by the findings. Public confidence in the justice system cannot exist without confidence in the integrity of forensic death investigations. Every inaccurate determination has the potential to deny justice to victims, deprive families of truthful answers, and undermine the rule of law. The citizens of Mississippi deserve a medical examiner's office that is independent, objective, transparent, and beyond reproach. Justice demands accountability.
Some cases refuse to stay buried. No matter how many official documents get signed, no matter how many boxes get checked, no matter how many doors get quietly closed, the truth has a way of forcing itself back into the light. The case of Nolan Wells is exactly that kind of case. And right now, the woman at the center of the controversy surrounding his death is facing a level of public scrutiny that is impossible to ignore. If this is your first time on this channel, you are in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and join the unrivaled true crime family, because we do not look away from the cases that powerful institutions would rather forget. Nolan Wells was a young African-American man whose death in Mississippi generated significant public concern and deep suspicion among his family, independent forensic experts, and civil rights advocates. His name has now become part of a growing list of cases tied to one central figure, Mississippi's chief medical examiner, Dr. Staci Turner, and the questions surrounding her office's handling of his death have escalated into something far larger than one family's grief. To understand why this case has ignited so much outrage, you have to understand the role a medical examiner plays in the pursuit of justice. The state medical examiner's office occupies one of the most consequential positions in Mississippi's entire criminal justice system. Medical examiners are entrusted with determining the cause and manner of death through objective scientific analysis. Their conclusions directly influence criminal investigations, judicial proceedings, insurance determinations, and most critically, whether grieving families ever receive any form of justice. When a medical examiner issues a ruling, that ruling carries the full weight of the state. It can be the difference between a murder investigation and a closed file. It can be the difference between accountability and silence. That is an enormous amount of power. And power without oversight is a dangerous thing. In the case of Nolan Wells, the official conclusions issued by Dr. Turner's office were not accepted as the final word, not by his family, not by independent forensic professionals, and not by the thousands of people who have since rallied around the demand for answers. An independent forensic pathologist conducted a separate review of the circumstances surrounding Nolan's death and reached a conclusion that stood in direct and stark contrast to the state's position. That independent expert determined that the manner of death should remain undetermined pending further investigation. More critically, that pathologist stated explicitly that foul play could not be excluded. Read those words carefully, because they matter enormously. When a board-certified forensic pathologist says foul play cannot be excluded, that is not a casual observation. That is a professional, scientific determination that the available evidence does not support ruling out the possibility that another person was involved in this death. That finding directly contradicts what Dr. Turner's office concluded. Two forensic professionals looked at the evidence surrounding Nolan Wells' death and arrived at fundamentally different conclusions. One of those professionals works for the state of Mississippi. The other has no institutional allegiance to protect. The family of Nolan Wells has publicly challenged the state's findings. Their pursuit of independent examination reflects what has been described as a profound lack of confidence in the state's investigation. And given what the independent review produced, that lack of confidence appears to be grounded in something real. But here is where this story becomes impossible to dismiss as an isolated incident, because Nolan Wells is not the only name that matters here. Over the past several years, multiple deaths involving African American individuals in Mississippi have generated substantial and documented public concern. Families, independent forensic experts, and civil rights advocates have repeatedly questioned whether these investigations were conducted with the rigor, transparency, and impartiality that accepted forensic standards require. And the name that keeps appearing at the center of these concerns is Dr. Staci Turner. Consider the case of Damian Cameron, who died following an encounter with Rankin County Sheriff's deputies. Dr. Turner's office classified the manner of his death as undetermined. Independent forensic pathologists who reviewed the case later concluded that the evidence supported a homicide determination, a finding that raised significant questions about whether the original examination appropriately evaluated all available evidence. Consider Trey Reed, a 21-year-old Delta State University student found hanging from a tree in September 2025. His death was officially ruled a suicide. His family publicly challenged that determination and commissioned their own independent forensic review. That family's decision to seek outside expertise speaks directly to their level of trust, or rather, their complete absence of trust, in the state's conclusions. Consider Shannon Wilson, whose family expressed documented concern that his body was embalmed before they believed all necessary forensic examinations had been completed, thereby limiting opportunities for any additional independent analysis. Whether or not established protocol was technically followed, the circumstances surrounding that case further eroded public confidence in the integrity and transparency of Mississippi's death investigation process. 4 cases, 4 families, 4 sets of independent concerns, all falling under the oversight of the same office, all involving African American decedents. That is not a coincidence anyone can responsibly dismiss. The accumulation of these cases has now translated into direct civic action, and it is significant. A formal petition addressed to the Governor of Mississippi, the Mississippi State Board of Medical Licensure, the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, the Mississippi Attorney General, and the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has been circulating, calling for an independent investigation into Dr. Staci Turner's professional conduct, her forensic determinations, and the death investigations that have been overseen by her office. That petition has gathered tens of thousands of verified signatures. The signatories include citizens, families, advocates, and supporters of equal justice from across the country. And the demands outlined within it are precise, measured, and impossible to characterize as fringe or extreme. The petition calls on authorities to appoint an independent panel of board-certified forensic pathologists from entirely outside the state of Mississippi to review the disputed death investigations associated with Dr. Turner's office. It demands a comprehensive audit of death classifications in cases where credible concerns have been raised by families or supported by independent forensic opinions. It calls for a formal determination of whether accepted forensic pathology standards, ethical obligations, and state laws were consistently followed. It asks officials to examine whether any systemic disparities or patterns exist in the investigation or classification of deaths involving African Americans. And it demands that the findings of any such investigation be publicly released to ensure transparency and restore whatever remains of public confidence. Furthermore, if the evidence uncovered through that investigation establishes professional misconduct, gross negligence, incompetence, ethical violations, or any breach of licensing standards, the petition explicitly calls for disciplinary proceedings, up to and including the suspension or revocation of Dr. Turner's medical license. The petition's language is careful to note that no single disputed case necessarily establishes misconduct on its own. That is a measured, responsible position. But it follows immediately with the observation that when multiple investigations involving similar public concerns continue to emerge from the same office, government oversight is not merely appropriate, it is essential. These are not the words of an angry mob. This is the documented language of a structured, legally conscious civic petition demanding that the proper authorities do their jobs. And that framing matters because what is being asked for here is not vigilante justice. It is not a demand that Dr. Turner be presumed guilty. It is a demand that the appropriate institutions look closely at a documented pattern and tell the public what they find. The petition explicitly states that it does not ask the public to presume wrongdoing. Instead, it asks government officials to fulfill their legal and ethical obligation to determine whether Mississippi's death investigation system is operating with scientific integrity, professional independence, and equal treatment under the law. That is a reasonable demand. That is a necessary demand. And the fact that it requires a petition with tens of thousands of signatures to prompt government officials to examine these questions says something deeply troubling about the systems that are supposed to protect families like Nolan Wells' family, without anyone having to beg. Public confidence in the justice system cannot exist without confidence in the integrity of forensic death investigations. Every inaccurate determination, whether the result of error, negligence, or something more deliberate, has the potential to deny justice to victims, deprive families of truthful answers, and undermine the foundational promise of equal treatment under the law. The citizens of Mississippi, and frankly the citizens of this country, deserve a medical examiner's office that is independent, objective, transparent, and beyond reproach. Nolan Wells deserved a thorough, impartial investigation into the circumstances of his death. His family deserved answers delivered with integrity. What they received instead was a state conclusion contradicted by independent forensic review, and an office whose pattern of determinations has generated enough documented concern to fuel a national petition and a growing chorus of voices demanding accountability. The independent pathologist's finding in the Wells case, that foul play could not be excluded, is not a minor footnote. It is the kind of finding that should trigger immediate, serious, and transparent review by every oversight body with jurisdiction. Whether that review happens, and whether it happens with genuine independence, remains the central question hanging over this case and every other case connected to Dr. Turner's office. The fight for Nolan Wells is not over. His name is being spoken. His case is being examined. Tens of thousands of people have signed their names to a demand for the truth, and the independent forensic record now exists in documented form, standing in contrast to the state's official position, waiting for the institutions with the authority to act, to decide whether they will. Justice demands accountability. Truth demands transparency. And the people connected to this case, the Wells family, the Cameron family, the Reed family, the Wilson family, deserve both. If this case moved you, if it made you angry, if it made you determined to keep paying attention, then make sure you are subscribed to Unrivaled True Crime, because we will continue covering this story as it develops. Hit the like button to help more people find this video, because the cases that matter most are the ones that cannot afford to be buried twice.